All right, it's the B Block Podcast. I am your host, Brandon Scott. Appreciate you for joining me. I got a couple of things that I want to get to, some topics that I want to talk about that are not Houston sports related. If y'all are willing to indulge me, and even if you're not, I'm going to get these takes off anyway. The first one is this Sherrone Moore news, the fired Michigan coach. Okay, Sherrone Moore. This has been out there for a couple of days now that Sherrone Moore was fired from Michigan because of an improper relationship, what they called an improper relationship with a staff member. Of course, Sherrone Moore is married with a few kids, but was also having, allegedly, having an improper relationship and an inappropriate relationship with a staff member. They fired him because of that. And then, and this was Wednesday, okay, mind you, not long after that, he is accused of going to this said staff member's home and breaking in, basically, breaking in and threatening to harm both himself and her. Was later arrested. And then, so the news of the day, basically, now we're recording this on Friday. The news of the day is essentially that he's been arraigned and formally charged with felony home invasion. Okay, let's start there. Felony home invasion. And that's the felony charge, and then a couple of misdemeanors. Okay, so, and I can actually pull this up here for the visual audience. So, and shout out to everybody that's listening on the audio only platforms. I would I would encourage you to check us out on YouTube as well, where you can also comment and see what we got going on visually. But this is a story from ESPN on the felony charge. Fired coach Sherrone Moore charged with 3 crimes. You see here that it's felony third degree home invasion, 2 misdemeanors, stalking in a domestic relationship, and breaking and entering. The arraignment, this is recording to ESPN.com. The arraignment and charges were offered a window into Moore's actions after he was fired for cause due to this inappropriate relationship. Now, before I get into like the serious or the unserious and serious parts about this that I really want to address, I feel like we just got to put the disclaimer out there that, breaking into somebody's home, threatening somebody, stalking somebody, all of those things are obviously horrible things. I don't feel like, it's like on me to necessarily condemn these things that all of us consider to be terrible things. So I do want to kind of get into the the other parts of this conversation that have come up. Like, obviously, Sherrone Moore has likely ruined his career as a coach, and for this to happen as the coach of Michigan is such a high profile program. Like, it's not, this is not Louisville or even Arkansas. Like, this is Michigan, and you're the head coach of Michigan, and you get fired for this, and then this is how you respond, allegedly. I don't think that you can come back from this. But there are a few things happening with this conversation that I find to be really interesting because of the sort of racial dynamics and racial implications of it. And so I kind of want to lay this out here. There's an idea that because black coaches are underrepresented at major college programs, and Sherrone Moore is one of the few, if not the one at the biggest, if not, it would be between him and Marcus Freeman at Notre Dame, who's probably, you probably say it's him, but those are probably the two, highest profile black coaches, or black coaches at the most high profile programs. Obviously, Deion Sanders is the most famous of them all, but Colorado's not nearly on the level of, say, a Notre Dame in Freeman's case, or a Michigan formerly in Moore's case. So there's this idea that that a black coach in such a rare position and spot to screw it up like this for himself doesn't only screw it up for himself clearly, but also puts a stain on black coaches and somehow ruins it for the next black coach, or at least makes it harder on black coaches going forward as they try to break these barriers and get into these rooms and get into these types of jobs where a black guy can coach Michigan. And look, I struggle with saying that out loud because I don't want to breathe life into that idea. And I also think, like, while I'm not here to, I'm certainly not here to invalidate the notion, because I think that idea and feeling comes from a real place. Like, the reason why you see folks like Ryan Clark and Jamel Hill, and I've actually heard others privately, people in the business and people outside of the business, that have said, "Hey man, that brother messed it up for the next brother. How dare he not understand the assignment and at least not go out like that." I totally get it, and like where that's coming from, but there's a couple of things that really bother me about it, about talking like this, and that is, first of all, I don't want to preempt the racism. I don't want to call out the racism preemptively, at least not in mixed company, because that is going to immediately, at least in my view, that's going to immediately turn off the audience or whoever it is that you're trying to get this point across to. And like, to me, this does feel like a thought among. I'm just gonna keep it real with y'all. This feels like a thought among black people, a common, perhaps shared thought among black people, that I just don't feel like needs to be shared out in these public spaces like this, because it breathes life into it and it offers windows into, in my view, a conversation that doesn't necessarily need to be had with everybody. And of course, here I am having the conversation on my podcast, but this is just my read on it. I don't feel comfortable with preemptively calling out racism in public in front of everybody before it happens, because I think that does either water down or somehow diminish the conversation, dilute the conversation, or hamper the conversation, because folks already don't want to have it, and now you want to have it before it happens, or point it out before it even happens. Now the next black coach not going to get this job. Well, I mean, it's not like this is happening a lot. We don't have a lot of cases of former head coach of major program faces 3 felony charges as soon as he gets fired. Coaches get fired all the time. We even have coaches get fired for inappropriate relationships with staff members. We've seen that. But how often do we see the guy get fired and then go break into the woman's home and threaten her and himself? It's not like you can take that and say, "Hey, like, use a counter example of that." He, in his own right, I think, in his own right, is is an outlier with these details. There are parts of this that are consistent with just men in power, having an affair with somebody that you work with, and then it kind of going left, and like that part is not unusual at all. Cheating on your wife with somebody that you work with, like that part is not necessarily unusual. But once you lose your job and go left, like, this is not. I got a tough time thinking of validating the idea that someone would think this is a black thing. This is something that black coaches do. Nah, man, I don't think this is something that black or white coaches do. This is something that allegedly Sherrone Moore does. And there have been people that have pointed out that, hey, when Bobby Petrino, or when Rick Pitino, or when somebody else does something silly and offensive or ridiculous, the white coaches don't have to answer for the rest of the white coaches the way that the black coaches got to answer for the rest of the black coaches. So why would you do it here if you don't do it there? I get people pointing that part out, but let's also not be naive and not recognize the difference in the burden of being a white coach versus being a black coach, where there are far fewer of you. I get what people are saying and where people are coming from with that. I just don't like to breathe life into this. Because here's the reality too. Whoever it is, whoever this boogeyman is that we're pointing out, and I say boogeyman when I do kind of subscribe to what people are saying about this, but whoever this boogeyman is that views Sherrone Moore's felony home invasion charge and stalking in a domestic violent or in a domestic relationship and breaking and entering, whoever views his alleged actions and then associates it with the rest of black coaches or paints a broad brush of this being indicative of specifically a black coach's actions, that's somebody that already viewed black people negatively. That's somebody that was already not inclined to hire a black coach anyway. That's somebody that didn't really need Sherrone Moore to mess up his situation in order for them to have negative thoughts about black people and about black coaches. If that is somebody that won't, if there is an AD or a booster or a president or anybody in charge of these things that views this Sherrone Moore situation as an indictment on black coaches, that's somebody that was not inclined to hire black coaches to begin with. That's somebody that does not believe in black people, or and certainly uh does not view black people fondly. And it's I would contend is not somebody that you necessarily want to work for to begin with. Maybe they are the gatekeeper to a job that you would take anyway, even knowing this information, because the money and the cachet is so good and you just can't pass it up. I get that, but it's not it also could be a job that you're better off without if that's how they view black people. I'm just saying. So like I just don't like to breathe life and to validate whoever these people are. Like to say he messed it up for the next black coach. Well, does the next black coach really want to work for somebody that views this as something that messed it up for the next black coach? Like if anything, I feel like the angle should be, hey, will this expose might this expose people who view it that way, or are there and look, and maybe that's the real like boogeyman chasing of, hey, let me go find the AD, let me go find the institution that now looks at black coaches differently, like that's that feels like chasing your tail maybe, and maybe not worth it. But I don't mind waiting on finding out who that school is, who that person is that says that thing. Like, I don't mind waiting for that thing to happen before I actually have to preemptively say, "Oh man, Sherrone Moore." Sherrone Moore messed up his life. He messed up his situation. He's embarrassed himself and his family. He's embarrassed Michigan. I'm sure he's embarrassed and allegedly probably scared the life out of this young lady, or this woman that he was apparently having an affair with, this staff member. Like there is enough things to that Sherrone Moore is already accused of. Again, a felony third degree home invasion, 2 misdemeanors, domestic stalking in a domestic relationship, and breaking and entering. Like that speaks for itself on what he should be held accountable for. What I don't have the energy for is holding him accountable for racism that we already knew existed long before we ever heard of him, long before we ever heard of Sherrone Moore. The folks that are saying this thing about him messing it up for the next black coach were already skeptical of institutions' willingness and enthusiasm for hiring black coaches. It's not like you ever believed in that anyway. More than like, if you're making this point, more than likely you were already skeptical of that. And if we're being consistent with that skepticism, okay, we do not suspect that this is going to change it one way or another, right? Like whoever it is that's like, you know what? Those black coaches, after this one off with Sherrone Moore, is that somebody who you want to work for, or whose ideas you even want to entertain? And certainly if you find out about it, worth exposing, like, look at this dumb fool, look at this idiot. If we find out about something like that, let's expose it. Let's put them on Front Street and and talk our you know what. But before it happens, I feel like, we family here on this podcast. I feel like that's a conversation that, folks who believe that should be having that conversation off mic. That shouldn't be like, man, let me get on the air and talk about how this messed it up for black coaches. Uh, that's one of those side conversations. I feel like, man, these racist folks who don't want to hire black coaches, man, they sure don't want to hire them now. Man, you sure right, man. What was he thinking? Yeah, we can have that conversation on the side, in the cafeteria, at the wherever, but we don't have to come on the air and make that be the prevailing. But man, he messed it up for black coaches. Nah, man, we already acknowledged well before we ever heard of Sherrone Moore that black coaches had it hard. And we were never under the illusion that because of Sherrone Moore that they wasn't gonna have it hard. Like, are people doing the counterfactual? Does anybody ever do this with Marcus Freeman? Where they're like, man, he's doing such a stellar job. He's so clean cut. He's such a great example of what it looks like, what it could look like if you hired a black guy or a biracial guy, mixed race guy with a black background, however you want to look at him. I view him as a black man. I'm sure he views himself that way as well. But like, you hire this guy to lead Notre Dame, and this is what it looks like. Now we can hire all the black coaches. No one, I never really hear people talk about that or talk like that. People just give Marcus Freeman his deserved flowers and acknowledge him, and that's really the end of it. I don't hear the other example, the other side of that. Of, man, let me tell you about how great Marcus Freeman is making it for black coaches and coaches of color. No one talks like that. But when a black coach does something off the wall and crazy, we got to be all out here preempting the racism and telling people how bad it's going to be. Mhm. I'm not trying to give white folks too much credit or anybody more credit than they deserve, but I think we can wait and just allow people to look at this, like, look at these details, and like reasonably say that you can apply this to somebody else. I shouldn't hire such and such because this happened. This very much looks like you know, I think it was Booger McFarland who tweeted that it is undefeated. It definitely looks like a common case of it being undefeated and it being the downfall of Sherrone Moore. But that's the end of where it becomes relatable. Everything else from there is to me specific to Sherrone Moore in this situation. So yeah, I don't love the whole this is going to be bad for black coaches conversation. in public, because it to me it causes an unnecessary recoil and an unnecessary stir, and honestly ignores, or maybe bypasses the fact that all of these things that we're talking about already existed before him and would exist after him. Whatever biases against black coaches already exist. It's not like him wilding out stirred racism or created it. Now, it exists where it exists, and then reasonable people, which you would like to hope that most people are, reasonable people are not going to look at the next black coach and be like, man, I can't hire him because he might start sleeping with one of his staff members. And then when it blows up in his face, he might break into her house and threaten to kill himself and her. Nobody's, I don't think anybody's talking like that. Now, the thing about it that I did want to pull up, uh, let's see, could I get this up? Since I got through the serious part, right? Can I get to the unserious? So a couple of unserious points that I want to make real quick about that I want to make about Sherrone Moore. Actually, I have not really been a fan of this guy basically ever since he was introduced to us. Whenever he took over for Harbaugh a couple years back, when they were having the NCAA the sign stealing stuff, and Harbaugh got suspended and all of that. Y'all remember when Sherrone Moore, in that interview, one of those post game interviews, cried on national television for this man. Went on TV and cried for this man about that man being suspended behind all of this stuff. And look, I'm not saying that a man can't cry or that a man can't even cry on TV, okay? Especially live TV if it hit him in the chest like that. But the idea that he would be crying for Harbaugh for that and in that situation, to me, just did not warrant a grown man crying, did not, to me, exhibit strength or stability. And I had questions about that guy ever since that moment. I'm like, oh no, that something's not right with that guy crying about this shit. Something is not right with this guy. This not my type of guy. And it's in a lot of us as black people, as black sports fans, to root for black coaches, black coordinators, black quarterbacks, black folks, black figures that are in positions that are historically or traditionally underrepresented, where we are historically and traditionally underrepresented. We tend to root for these guys. It's both spoken and unspoken. But with this one, I was just telling somebody the other day, man, I haven't claimed dudes since. And I'm not, I do not have the power or authority, nor would I even try to strip somebody of their blackness. I'm not like trying to trade them in a racial draft or nothing like that. I'm just saying that I ain't got nothing to do with Buddy. I ain't claiming him after that. Ever since then, I have not been a fan. Okay. I want to point that out. Then this goofy stuff happens, right? Like, because I'm agreeing for the most part that not only did he mess it up for himself, but it is a bad look. It's a bad look for anybody. Not that it's got to be a broad brush for black coaches, but it's just he just looks dumb. Like, what are you doing? Like, keep it together. You know, reel it in, buddy. But these details, sharing them here on the screen. Prosecutors said Friday that Moore forced entry into the staff member's apartment and said, I'm going to kill myself. I'm going to make you watch. My blood is on your hands. You ruined my life. Okay. Later on, the prosecutor says that the timeline goes like this. After he was fired, he barged his way into the woman's apartment. He went to a drawer in the kitchen and grabbed several butter knives. Check this out. Grabbed several butter knives and a pair of kitchen scissors before threatening to take his own life. several butter knives, and a pair of kitchen scissors. This is alleged from the assistant prosecutor detailing the timeline of his actions. Barged his way into the woman's apartment, went to a drawer in the kitchen, butter knives, and a pair of kitchen scissors. Now, I was just transparent with y'all in that I've not been a fan of this guy since the beginning. But butter knives and a pair of kitchen scissors threatening to take your own life. This is an unserious person. This is an unserious person. Like I think I'd be a little bit more sensitive to the mental health aspect of this, or the idea that maybe this is just somebody that is crying out for help, or maybe they really are prone to self harm in some way. Maybe, and I did see here that Moore had to undergo a mental health evaluation, which is kind of standard whenever guys go to jail. But like I can't even find it in me to be sensitive about this because he's so unserious. Again, with the butter knives and a pair of kitchen scissors, you're not killing yourself with no butter knives or no kitchen scissors. You can hurt yourself. You can mess some stuff up. You can really make a mess with butter knives and a pair of kitchen scissors. But you're not serious about really killing yourself with you're not. You're not serious about killing yourself with butter knives. Not butter knives and a pair of kitchen scissors. So like this to me is just screaming like unserious drama, doing way too much, performative. Maybe there are some mental health things going on here, man. From like between the first time I really saw this guy and now the most recent time I'm hearing him, he starts with crying on national TV for really no good reason. And now he's ending it here. The bookend here is barging into a woman's home that has already kind of gotten him fired and threatening to kill himself with butter knives and a pair of kitchen scissors. I cannot cry for this man, and I cannot give him even the respect and credibility. This is all alleged, of course, but I cannot cry for this man or give him the respect of being reflective of black coaches. Nah, man. We not about to do this. We not about to use some clown as the benchmark or the the example of black coaches. And Marcus Freeman's right here. All right. And Deion Sanders is in Colorado. And never mind the fact that that's stupid anyway. All of it. Let's not feed the stupidity. Let's not give stupidity extra energy. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm getting at. All right. So the other thing, that's the Sherrone Moore stuff. No, I spent a half hour on that. I'm gonna try to get this Diddy stuff out of here quickly. No Diddy. So I watched the Netflix doc on Diddy, and there were a few. So there's a lot going on here, and I know all of y'all, if y'all are into this type of thing, you're seeing on your social media feeds some of the pushback, both from Diddy and then some of the response from the 50 side, and then you're seeing people weigh in that also sort of know about these things that were around at the time, know some of the central figures, pointing out some of the things that the documentary both got wrong, but also possibly left out. There is a lot of layers to this whole thing that look, feel free to jump into the comment section on this on our YouTube, on the B Block Podcast YouTube. If there's anything that you want to get into or talk about, I will engage you in the chat. But I want to really kind of nail it down. There's a lot of stuff, of course, and I don't feel like I got to do the preamble that I did earlier again with like the Diddy stuff is reprehensible. I feel like we all know all of that. But the part that was most revealing to me, the part that I was most fascinated by, as somebody who was mind you, when Tupac gets killed in 1996, I am 7 years old at that point. By the time Biggie gets killed in 1997, I am still only 7 years old. And I'm about to turn 8 on Biggie's birthday, by the way. We are both born on the same day, May 21st. And so what would have been his 25th birthday would have been my 8th birthday, right? And so these are things that I've been aware of for most of my life, right? For most of my life. I was a little kid when all of this was happening, and I've basically followed the commentary and then the times when it's gone dark, and the whole, did you see Tupac in the Bahamas, and like jokes and all of that has been a part of my life as somebody that grew up in the 90s and early 2000s. Okay, so I've followed, and of course I'm a child of hip hop. I followed all of this, and so this is the part of the documentary that stood out to me most, because I'd already heard about some of the disgusting stuff. Not to, I'm not trying to sex shame or victim shame anybody that was involved in any of that, but like that, all of it is crazy and speaks for itself. But when it comes to the Tupac and Biggie stuff, here's the part that I was not aware, or let me start with what I was aware of. I was familiar enough with the story to know that at that Tyson fight in November of 96, at that Tyson fight, Tupac and Suge Knight and whoever was with them jumped a guy who they believed had jacked a death row chain. I had been aware of that story. I'd even been aware of that guy possibly, or not even possibly, that guy being affiliated with the Crips. And of course, we know Suge is affiliated with the Bloods. I was aware of that. I was also aware of the outward and obvious affiliation between Suge Knight and the Bloods, and then sort of a lesser known and unspoken, under the radar connection between Diddy and the Crips. I just did not have the through line, and had never been really able to connect the dots and kind of thread the needle, if you will. But this documentary did that for me. I did not know the connection between the guy that um between the guy that Tupac and Suge and their crew jumped because of the death row chain, the connection between him and ultimately Diddy, allegedly, from this doc, right? And so the key figure here that I did not know about was Keefe D, right? Keefe D is the uncle to this Orlando guy who they called Lane. Um, again, who Tupac and Suge Knight jumped, and who was alleged to have tried to snatch a death row chain just a few weeks or months earlier, prior to this fight. Did not know that he was the nephew to a well-known gang member slash drug dealer named Keefe D, who apparently had some affiliation with Diddy. And this is all alleged, right? This is all what's in the documentary, but I found it to be pretty convincing when you hear this never before heard audio, this proffer tape that he had with, I guess it was the LAPD detective, or there was some detective that had been kind of sent on a special task force to look into this, and he talked to him about this. and he even was able to pinpoint moments where the relationship develops between himself and Diddy. I had also heard of Zip, right? The New York gangster who had connections to the Crips, right? But I never heard of necessarily the relationship between Zip, Keefe D, who again I'd never heard of, and ultimately Orlando, the guy who got jumped. Like I did not have this through line of Diddy knowing Zip, Zip introducing Diddy to Keefe D, and Orlando, ultimately the guy who gets jumped in Vegas, being related to Keefe D. I didn't have that. And if y'all had it, shout out to you. I did not have that through line. I missed that part of the story. Didn't know that part. Because it did stand to reason that whoever got jumped in Vegas ultimately was responsible for killing Tupac, right? What a hell of a coincidence it would be if you jump somebody in a casino or a hotel or whatever it is at this major event. You stomp a mud hole in them, and they supposedly a gangster. You beat them up in public, and then you get shot just a short time later that same night, and it's somebody different that hit you. Nah, whoever hit you is who you just hit, either exactly them or somebody acting on their behalf. That's how that works in the streets, and that's just logic. So I figured that, but what I didn't have was the through line between that person and how you exactly connect that person to Diddy, allegedly. How you could allegedly connect that to Diddy as they did in this documentary, right? The part about Keefe D's, this is the part that really blew my mind. The part about Keefe D's 64 Chevy being the car that they used in the first Usher video where Diddy's driving the car. Can't ever really look at that video the same. Not to say that I look at it a lot, but imagine that the vehicle used in Usher's first video might have belonged to the person that killed Tupac. The person that might have killed Tupac might have also loaned his vehicle to Diddy for Usher's first music video. Those were sentences that I could not put together before this documentary. And those are the sentences that blow me away the most from watching the documentary. There's some weird shit going on. Okay. There's a lot of talk about obviously the sex, the sexual assaults, the dirty macking, which I think I was kind of aware of, but didn't have as much detail. I don't know. I think I got a little bit more insight on that too, because I didn't know about him and who was it? I didn't know about him. Was it Eric Sermon? I think it was. I didn't know about him and Eric Sermon having, the story that Sermon tells about him swinging on him when Misa's in his truck, in the passenger side of his truck, and then that being the moment where they ride down the road, they're supposed to fight, but then he plays Ready to Die. Just like that was a weird story, but I'd never heard it before, and I didn't realize how connected they were per se, or maybe I'd forgotten about that if I did. So there's that. There is, oh man, there's just there's so much from that documentary. There is the kind of how the breakdown of how he had to reinvent himself. I was experiencing all of this in real time, but did not know what was happening behind the scenes, obviously. But when you put it in chronological order of how the bad boy empire falls, the initial empire kind of implodes because of Diddy's own doing, and then he has to kind of remake himself with the reality show and making the band and stuff. I didn't I didn't view that in the context of a second act per se. I just being a kid at the time, a young person at the time, just and knowing Diddy the whole time, just viewed him as just doing more Diddy shit. But yeah, to put it in that context, the Craig Mack reference, I had not thought of Craig Mack probably in almost 30 years. I'm only 36. And it's got to have been close to 30 years. Like, I even vaguely remember the news about him passing away. So much focus and mention of Craig Mack in this documentary was also really revealing or just brought memories of the time for me, because I had not thought about him in probably nearly 30 years. Um the uh Barrows, the was it Kirk or Keith Barrows? I don't want to mess up my guy's name, but the guy who co-founded Diddy with, um, yeah, Kirk Burrows, the guy who co-founded Bad Boy with Diddy. The big talking point was how crazy it sounded that he let Diddy intimidate him into signing over his 25% in the Bad Boy by holding a bat over him, and how that just doesn't sound right. But some of the theories I've been seeing out there about them too, and maybe there's literature about this out there, but there's like stuff out there that suggests that maybe there was more than just a working relationship going on there. There's something different and odd was going on there. And even Burroughs himself in this documentary seemed really reluctant to go down that road of like the nature what the potential nature of their relationship might have been beyond co-founder of Bad Boy. So I think that's a part of this that maybe is like implied, but not necessarily really, because it wasn't really the doc. I guess wasn't really about that, but wasn't fully explored on what exactly was going on there. But I think if you look a little bit more into that, you might understand a little better how that might have happened that way. With because again, most people are saying rightfully, like, you can threaten me with a bat or whatever, but before I sign over, like, you might have to actually hit me with the bat. Bad Boy at that point. Or especially if I'm a man, like man to man, like, I'm trying to think of how big and bad would a dude have to be for me to not defend myself in that situation? Because mind you, I'm not out here trying to fight nobody. I'm not here trying to convince you that I'm no kind of badass and can whoop people's ass and all that kind of stuff. That's not me. I'm not even trying to be that guy. I'm just saying that if push come to shove in that situation and you gotta defend yourself, like, I do feel like you're gonna have to hurt me in some kind of way. Like, there's gonna have to be a confrontation, and it's gonna have to be made clear to me that I cannot win this confrontation, or that I'm gonna lose this confrontation badly. Like, you're gonna have to show me, okay? And maybe you do. Maybe you do. Like, maybe you actually, and that's the worst case scenario. You hit me with the bat and you kill me, and I could have just signed over the money and saved my life. But nah, I gotta test the theory, man. And I feel like that's how it would be with most people. I don't even want to just say men, but people. You got 25% of Bad Boy. You can't just threaten me with the bat. You're gonna have to swing it. You gotta swing that thing. I gotta see you swing it. I gotta have a chance to grab that bad boy and yank it out your hand and hit you with it. Like, I gotta know that I can't do that first. And they say, okay, okay, I'm sorry. Don't kill me. I'll sign it. But we got it. Like, where was the resistance? Feels like there's more to that story. But yeah, those are takeaways. I want to do a little something that wasn't just Texans related. I feel like if you want to check out some of the Texans thoughts and commentary, I've actually provided plenty of that on the page from Sports Radio 610. We talked quite a bit about the Texans season and where they're at right now. The offense, how I'm kind of like having, I'm kind of getting resigned to the fact that it's never going to be probably like this prolific offense, but they got playmakers that can help them survive. So y'all can check that out. It's on the podcast page, actually on the YouTube page for y'all to check out. So make sure that you do that. Find the B Block on YouTube and also wherever it is that you get your podcast. I am Brandon Scott. I appreciate you for being here. And until next time, y'all be good.